Have you ever felt annoyed when people criticized you for not drinking? Have you ever felt bad or guilty for not drinking? Have you ever felt like you should be drinking more? Do you see what I did there? I flipped the CAGE questions. CAGE is a 4-question tool that clinicians use in order to diagnose alcoholism. But in our culture of alcoholism and peer pressure, often it's not about feeling bad because we're drinking too much. Our friends are pressuring us for feeling bad because we're not drinking enough. Hi, this is Sarah Russell. I'm your microdose host here with your weekly mood boost and tools for transformation. And in today's episode, I'll be talking about why your friends hate it when you stop drinking. Kyle Tierman, the macrodose host for this show, is doing a 1-year no beer challenge. And if you're interested in this, you can hop onto the Telegram account and you can commiserate with each other, congratulate each other, celebrate with each other. And here's the thing. I'm not anti-drinking, but I am pro people making their own decisions about their own bodies. And with drinking, it's wild to me how much peer pressure there still is that I am experiencing as a grown-ass adult. Because when you think about peer pressure, don't you think about like middle schoolers, high schoolers, college students, not adults, right? We're supposedly supposed to grow out of this. And yet I personally experience from family, from friends, and perfect strangers pressure around my alcohol habits. And here's something you should know about me if you are going to become near and dear to me in any way. I don't say no more than twice. So go ahead and ask me, and I'll say no. You can ask me a second time. I'll give you a second no. If you ask me a third time to something I've already said no to twice, you are likely to get a shark stare from me, dead eyes, or I will walk away. I only say no twice. So, why is there so much peer pressure around drinking alcohol? One of the ways this shows up is if you change your behavior around alcohol in some way. So for instance, if you typically drink and all of a sudden you stop drinking, or if you haven't been drinking and all of a sudden you start drinking, your friends and family are going to notice and they're going to have some feelings about it. And there are also some things that are considered just socially acceptable. So one of our cultural rituals around alcohol, one of the ways that we bond, one of the ways that we have a shared experience and create connection with each other is through the ritual of buying each other around. So this is one of the ways that we demonstrate generosity. It's one of the ways that we demonstrate camaraderie, and also one of the ways that we demonstrate our wealth is by buying around for our friends. And then they reciprocate, right? Then I've got the next one is so common. And if you remove yourself from this ritual, you're removing yourself from both giving and receiving a gift, which as social creatures, that's kind of a no-no culturally. Like people have a strong response to that. And there's a study that was done by Drink Aware that found that 35% of adults surveyed drank more than they intended to because they were pressured to by their peers. And pressure to drink can be subtle or overt. It can be friendly or aggressive. But we all know what it's like if you're the only one that's not drinking, right? You're a buzzkill. You're boring. Have you ever heard somebody say like, I don't trust people who can't drink? I have. I've heard people say that. It's this idea that you're not a team player, right? And the implication is that you're not comfortable letting your guard down around these people. So are they even your friends if you're not comfortable letting your guard down? And then if you're not comfortable letting your guard down, they're not comfortable letting their guard down. And now you've ruined the party because you didn't want to have the drink. All right, so the National Institute of Health talks about the wider social context for socially acceptable drinking. And part of this comes down to how much drinking is tied to masculinity. You're supposed to man up with your drink, right? And how can you man up when you're drinking? Well, part of the way that we determine this is what you drink, how often you drink, how much you drink, and these are considered markers of masculinity, right? And a little bit about what I talked about with that wealth as well, because men are supposed to be the protector providers, the breadwinners. You're supposed to bring home the bacon. And how do you demonstrate you're able to do that? By buying alcohol for all of your friends, of course, or taking that fancy shot of Patron. Like this is one of the ways that you demonstrate wealth as a man. So masculinity is tied up with drinking in part. Part of the other wider social context around this is that there's a negative perception of non-drinkers, right? You're boring, You don't know how to party. How am I supposed to have a good time with you? Snooze fest. Also, the idea of being an outsider. Well, everybody else is doing it and you're the oddball out. You're the only one not doing it. So you feel a little isolated. You feel a little lonely. And also because alcohol is the sociable thing to do. We do it for sports events, for graduations, for birthdays, for funerals. Think about how many adult gatherings or social functions you go to that don't involve alcohol in some way. It's just part of our normal social context. So there can be friendly pressure to keep drinking. There can be forced pressure to keep drinking. And then there's like this weird murky thing. It's kind of like a keeping up with the Joneses of like, well, shit, they've already had 2 drinks. I'm on my first cocktail. I better slam this back so I can catch up. We feel this pressure to stay at the same level as the people drinking around us, right? So this is also part of the social context. Something that I find really funny is people ask, so what do you drink? As if they're asking you your horoscope sign, as if they're going to find out all of your strengths and weaknesses and your personality quirks based on what you drink. Think I'm exaggerating? Think about the difference if you were to walk up to me and ask me what I'm drinking. And if I was like, I'd like a Cosmo, please, versus if I ask you for a shot of whiskey with a pickleback. You're going to have a different impression of me, despite the fact that I like both of those things and might want them in the same night because I've got a gut of steel and I can do that. But I digress. So how will your friends know you love them at 2 a.m. if you're not drinking with them, if you're removing yourself in some way, if you're saying no to the gift of alcohol in some way? Along with this idea of like, how are your friends going to know that you love them is you need to have a damn good reason for why you're not drinking. And we all know, right? What are the socially acceptable reasons for not drinking? We know because if you pass on a drink, people will assume one of these things. They will assume, if you're a woman, are you pregnant? Super invasive question, by the way. And also, you know what happens when we assume? We make an ass of you and me. Okay, so being pregnant is one of the reasons that's socially acceptable to not drink. Being the designated driver. Possibly you can give the excuse that you're on some kind of medication, like you might be able to get away with that one. But also this idea that you're sober. People will assume like, oh, like you're not drinking? Did you have some kind of problem? And the very first thing I want to say is, if that's true, then why the hell are you asking? Then why the hell are you pushing? Can we please have some respect? Please, some respect for people's struggles and their personal choices and the ways they're trying to improve their lives. Why? But there is this huge stigma around sobriety and around alcoholism. And for instance, what is it called if you smoke too many cigarettes? You're a chain smoker? That's not the same thing as being an alcoholic, right? Because here's the thing with alcoholism is with cigarettes are the bad guy. We're going to put all these warning labels on like cigarettes are the problem. With alcoholism, the person's the problem. We have this very strange double standard around our substances, right? So as a culture, we need to incredibly justify our alcohol consumption because if it gets to be too much by the culture standard, that's on the person, that's not on the substance, for some strange reason. Okay, so alcohol is how we celebrate, how we commiserate, how we congratulate, right? And not drinking is considered the odd choice. And explain to me why it's the odd choice if I get a good night's sleep, I wake up the next day not hungover, and I still have money in my wallet. Explain to me. Okay, well, like I said, so much of this is for social reasons. There's a social context. It's so important socially that we've actually created this idea that there are health benefits to drinking. And Andrew Huberman talks about this, that the amount of red wine you would need to consume in order to get all the benefits of the, resveratrol, in order to get all the benefits of that, you would have to consume so much alcohol that you would absolutely start seeing declines rather than gains. Same thing, right? Like I remember at the height of my Motion Pacific days when I was dancing like 5 hours a day, like teaching a couple hours, taking a couple hours every day, I was completely justifying going out to Lupolo afterwards to get me a beer because it was full of B vitamins. It was going to help all my sore muscles, which, I'm going to tell you, it kind of sort of did. Again, I'm not here to hate on alcohol. I'm here to hate on peer pressure to have more alcohol. That's what I'm hating on in all of this. And I know people who, when they've stopped drinking, whether at a barbecue or at a music festival, they will walk around with something in their hands that resembles an alcoholic bottle just so they don't get harassed for not drinking. Now, some people are worried that alcohol is the glue that holds their relationships together. And part of it's what I mentioned in the beginning, right? This idea that everybody lets their guard down and, like gets a little bit friendlier, a little bit cozier, like has a little bit less of a filter. But there is this idea that like, if you stop drinking with your friends, like, are you even going to be friends anymore? So that's a fear that people have. And one of the reasons that people apply this pressure. Although I would like to say, let's just replace alcohol with donuts in this context. And can you imagine if every social context you went to, there was a box of donuts on the table, and like, again, choose to eat the donuts if you want to, or choose to not eat the donuts. But can you imagine if people were like, well, like, why aren't you eating the donuts? And if you're like, oh, they don't make me feel very well. And you're like, well, but eating donuts is fun. And like, we all eat donuts together, and eating donuts is how we bond. It would be ridiculous, right? And yet we do this with alcohol. We have this idea, like from the perspective of like you and like while you're drinking, right? That if you're not drinking, that like living a sober life means that you're living a life of deprivation and you're missing out in some way, that you're losing your social life, potentially that you're losing your personality, you're losing your ability to relax, you're losing your ability to be courageous. And so there's this idea that you're not going to be able to network as well, or you're not going to be able to bond as well. So there is this fear that we're going to have a diminished capacity in some way if we don't drink. And we also have this belief that alcohol disarms our social defenses. And that might be true to a certain extent, but not really the way that we typically think about it. And Malcolm Gladwell talks about this beautifully, where we have this idea that alcohol makes us our more true selves. And he's going, calling bullshit on that. It actually makes us our most myopic selves. So we can only focus on what's right in front of us, what's happening with immediacy in front of us. We forget the bigger picture. We forget our bigger dreams. We forget our bigger wants. We forget our bigger horizon of time. So yes, it disarms us, but it makes us incredibly narrowly focused rather than being able to hold the big picture of what we want. And probably most terrifying about why there's so much pressure to drink, even as we age, even as adults, is because it's this idea of being different than the clan in some way, of being different than our friends, being different than our partners, being different than our colleagues and our coworkers. And we want a seat at the fire. We want to be part of the tribe. We want to all be part of community in some way because, you've heard me say this before, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. We have this deep in our bodies. And so there's this fear of being othered or displaced in some way that comes with all of this pressure to drink alcohol. So whether you drink or don't, let other people decide. Let other people decide what they're doing with their bodies, because that's how you can actually show your friends you love them at 2 a.m. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcast or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Also, I love it when you visit our YouTube channel and you get to see all the faces I'm making during this podcast, and leave your comments about what kind of experience you're having with the material I'm creating. You can also go to trendswithbenefits.com to check out all of our written content, as well as sign up for our newsletter with weekly tidbits to try to make your lives a little better, a little easier, a little funnier. Also, if you're having any relationship difficulties, please send me a voice memo to podcast@mudwtr.com, and I will respond on this podcast to give you some free coaching, to give you some free support. Again, we need all the wolves we can get, y'all. Let me be one of your wolves. Let me be part of your pack. I'm here for you. And I can also offer you a discount code for our Mushroom Boost, MUD's latest offering. And if you use the code BOOST25, you can get 25% off your first order of Mushroom Boost, which is a blend of 8 different mushrooms for vitality, for focus, for immunity. Just another fun potion for you to add to your drinks or your baked goods. Y'all, may you feel so good inside your bodies, inside your relationships, inside your lives. Take care.